All right, into the world pool. So, birthday dare. Something egregious, Grant said. Egregious, Evan murmured. A fat wasp droned over his chest. Evan swatted it away before it could land on him. Outlandish. Wild, Grant said. Crazy. Egregious doesn't mean crazy. Sure it does. The wasp came back. Evan picked up one of his sneakers, slashed at it, and connected. The wasp body arched high, caught the breeze, and fell into the pool. And now Grant was looking at the scummy pool, his mismatched eyes glittering. Evan knew that look. He waited for the words. I dare you, Grant said. I'll go get my trunks. A couple of years ago, Evan had eaten a grasshopper for his birthday dare. No matter how much scum was on top of the pool, it couldn't be more disgusting than the grasshopper wriggling and spitting and kicking in his mouth. No, Grant said, no trunks. Evan rolled his eyes. He'd gone skinny dipping in the pond behind Jamie Winecki's house in 4th grade. 3 years, 100 years ago. In your underwear, Grant said. Somehow going and wearing his underwear was more obscene than going in with nothing at all. Evan stared at the water, at the brown and green flotillas of algae. Imagined them clinging to his skivvies. Egregious, he muttered, and kicked off his other shoe. Grant whooped and began giving details. You have to dive all the way in, no panty-waist tippy-toey dippy-dum. And you have to swim all the way down, in the deep end. Dad's hammer and Uncle Hector's saws banged and buzzed away up at the house. Evan squatted, listening to their ruckus. A cacophony, that's what they were making, pounding the deck into repair. If they stopped for more than a couple seconds, that would mean they were done. They'd come down here and see how their boys were getting along. See Evan in his tidy whities, and Grant grinning and what? Uncle Hector would laugh, and they'd probably throw Grant in tit for tat. And Dad would laugh. He'd laugh right now, but later he'd find an excuse to pull Evan aside and question him. And he'd remind Evan about James Van Dryken last year and all the preverts all over the internet. And he'd use his church voice the whole time. And Evan would have to say at least 1,000 times, no, I'm fine. It was just the birthday dare, that's all. The same as it's always been since Grant and I were 5 years old. The hammering went on. The saw went on. Evan took a step and a breath and held onto his briefs with one hand as he dived. The pool was as warm as sweat. Evan kicked away from the surface, algae shifting and bumping against his bare legs. Even with his mouth squeezed tight, he could taste the foulness of the water, like it seeped down through his ears to touch the back of his throat. There had been no squares edging the poolside, advertising depth. It could be 10 feet, 12 feet, 1,000 feet deep. Evan couldn't sense the bottom or the surface. All around him floaties and foulness and warm water like piss. He was swimming through a toilet, that's what. And maybe he'd gotten into the bend without realizing it. What if somebody flushed? Evan opened his eyes. Light blurred above him at the end of the angle of his skinny body. And below him more water, darker and deeper. He stretched his arm, kicked his legs, and pushed on. Pushed in, he thought, in slick, sweaty water. The water grew cooler the deeper he swam. He kept his eyes open, despite how they burned. The light above dwindled, and then was gone, and the water didn't end. That wasn't right. Where the pool was deep and dark, that was where the bottom had to be. Covered by a layer of muck, maybe inches of decaying leaves blown into the pool during the water. But water and quiet surrounded him instead. Quiet. He couldn't hear Dad and Uncle Hector banging at the deck. He couldn't hear the bubbles when he let some air out of his lungs. Evan swiped at the water edging deeper. His fingers touched sand. Sand. At the bottom of a pool? Something touched him back. Not the soft touch of algae. Not the drift of debris against his skin. It caressed his arm. A direct, intentional touch.
That's probably a good stopping place.
All right.
Unless you know that if we hear the next sentence, it'll be even cooler. Okay, that's good.
He gets to ramble because he's the publisher.
Not of that book, I'm not, but of the original. Thank you guys. I really appreciate you coming. Scott came from Fredericksburg, Virginia to do this with us. And the others are local, but they still had to interrupt their lives to come. And it's important to me that you guys know that this venue exists and that these shorts, when they say it's hard to find good short stories, they mean it's hard for you to find good short stories because it's hard to find short stories at all. You guys are actually doing a good job of finding good short stories. The writers are there. They're writing the stories. And now you know one way to get them. Now, I'm going to still talk a little bit more, but not about that.